What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What is going on, guys? Week 13 Underdog Drafter Party. As always, I'm here with Ryan Heath. We'll be talking through every angle of the Week 13 Underdog slate, favorite scroll down options, top values. We can also get to all your pressing questions this week. And the show will be a little different than a normal week, considering I was all in on the Thanksgiving Day slate. I spent the last 24 hours eating food and drinking beer with my family. So I'll be going in fairly blind here. We'll be asking Ryan Heath a lot of questions. Didn't even get a chance to watch Cashing Points. Had a dinner during Cashing Points. So, but before we get into any player takes here, Ryan, got to know, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was great, man. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Got to see family, hang out, watch some football. Yeah, can't really beat it.
Yeah. My Thanksgiving was pretty great too. I was pretty low on the Bears. I was pretty down on Caleb Williams. Did not play a lot of Caleb in DFS. So that second half was crushing to me in a way. And then as a guy who grew up a Bears fan, extra crushing based on the ending. I mean, that was awful. And I didn't even realize that I had a sweat going in one of the Thanksgiving Day underdog tournaments. Ended up finishing like 85th for $100, but I did have a chance to win there down at the end. And I didn't even realize it until Friday morning. So it's just the way it goes when you're sweating DraftKings harder than underdog, but that will not be the case on this show. Going to draft a lot of great underdog lineups. Obviously, going to start with the quarterback position. Ryan, I wouldn't say a whole lot stands out to me on first glance as a guy that hasn't done a ton of research outside of this being a very deep quarterback slate. Ryan, what are your thoughts at quarterback this week?
Yeah, it's deep, but it's deep in like an uncomfortable way for me where I feel like you almost have to at least consider everyone in the top six. I like the closest guy I am to just ruling out of my pool is Jaden Daniels, just kind of on game environment concerns. But I mean, he seems fully healthy. He certainly has 30 plus point upside, just like any of these top four guys. So yeah, I think you have to mix all of these guys in. Someone like a Baker Mayfield, the CJ Stroud, I like both of them. I really like Nico Collins stacks. I really like the Mike Evans stacks. You can single those guys up and do that all day. There's a super awesome low owned bring back for both of them actually. Chuba Hubbard is a good bring back for the Baker stacks because you want that game to at least stay somewhat competitive, and that's when Hubbard has done his best. And then with the Texans, Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be almost 0% owned based on ADP. Wow. And he is. So you say wow, but there's so many good plays on this slate that it's not like that shocking. But yeah, I mean, Texans are top 5 in busted coverage yards allowed. Like if this game shoots out with Trevor Lawrence back, with Thomas now probably fully healthy, coming off of that chest injury where he'd previously been a limited practice participant for like 9 practices in a row. And before the bye, we saw him kind of looking more like his former self. So yeah, coming out of the bye, this could be the BTJ blow up spot we've been waiting for too. As far as scroll downs, there's a few that are really solid that I like. Justin Herbert, I really, really like this game environment. I think with someone like a Justin Herbert or with a Matthew Stafford or pretty much anyone else you're scrolling down to this week, I do think it's more important to go for like the double stacks. Because the projections are so high for these other quarterbacks, you probably are going to need the game and or multiple of their pieces to get there for one of these lower drafted quarterbacks to be optimal. So with Herbert, it's easy with Ladd, but Will Dissly is also a great guy I love scrolling to in only really, or actually not really only in Herbert stacks, but especially in Herbert stacks. Matt Stafford is really solid. The Saints have been giving up so much through the air recently, incredibly condensed offense. You can double him. That's my favorite way to play Stafford, of course, is to double him. And I think you can even go to an Anthony Richardson. You can play him naked and kind of save your build. yeah, I haven't gotten down to like any Kirk Cousins doubles or Geno Smith doubles, but they're theoretically could work. I think both Drake London and Darnell Mooney are going to be low owned too. So yeah, just so many different directions you could go this week. If I had to pick like a couple of favorites, it would be like Jalen Hurts and Matt Stafford are probably going to end up, and Burrow. That'll be my top three. Will be Hurts, Burrow, Stafford in terms of ownership likely. But yeah, I'm going to have exposure to a lot of guys this week, which is pretty rare for me. I usually am fairly condensed at QB, where I have like 4 or 5 guys I really concentrate on. Probably going to be more like 8 or 9 this week.
Yeah, that was sort of the vibe I was getting when I was ripping some drafts for this slate. I mean, as you guys can see, my exposures here, I've already only done about 10 drafts so far, but I've already been pretty diversified in the quarterbacks that I've taken. And if you are interested in seeing your player exposures while you draft or while you update your rankings, bestballoverlay.com is the place to go. They have a great overlay tool. It's super simple to use, super simple to log in. They make it really easy to update your exposures, and you can also see combinatorial ownership. You guys will see while we're drafting, but it is a very, very helpful tool. Over at bestballoverlay.com, you can use promo code PARTY to save $10 a month on your subscription. So definitely go check that out. Ryan, we'll move on to running back here. I think running back is really interesting this week, if only for the fact that I was absolutely shocked we could get a guy who's pretty much locked into 100% of backfield touches at RB8 in Chase Brown. I think Chase Brown is a glaring value this week beyond Chase Brown, who I imagine you line up with me on. Who else do you like at running back this week?
Yeah, Brown. I don't understand the Chase Brown ADP at all.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy to me. I guess kind of second to him for me is Bijan Robinson. So I was talking about how we like that game environment, but also Tyler Algier only played 5% of the snaps in the Falcons' last game. That was coming off when he got stuffed on the goal line 3 times in a row, and then Bijan came in on 4th and goal and like converted and made it look easy. I think there's a chance that this is just Bijan's backfield now. He's in the Kyron Williams role. He's going to play an 80% plus snap share, get all the high value touches. And if that's the case, then he should be up in the first round based on that expectation. So that's something I'm leaning into across the main slate this week in battle royales, because the price is definitely right for Bijan. Kamara projects as our top running back of the slate. I know you can definitely poke some holes in his upside in terms of touchdown equity, especially with Taysom Hill on the field. But a guy that projects for multiple points median more than a Saquon Barkley or than a Joe Mixon going in the early second round, it is also someone I want to make sure I'm at least not passing him up, right? Like I want to make sure I'm at least at Kamara.
Ryan, before we get into some of these other running backs, I was kind of curious, just looking at these first round options, something that struck me was I feel like this is not a great week to land on the 101. And I'm pretty interested. I know we'll talk a bit more in depth about receivers shortly, but guys like Nico Collins, Jamar Chase both feel very competitive to me relative to a Saquon Barkley or a Joe Mixon, where you can find maybe not as much with Mixon, but certainly with Barkley. I mean, Barkley's a guy who could put up 150 yards from scrimmage and not score any touchdowns, in which case he's not winning you anything. How do you sort of feel about that general 101 draw this week?
Yeah, I'm ending up with a lot of Mixon. I'm taking Mixon probably on like half of my 101s and Barkley on the other half right now. I'm okay being a bit below the field on Barkley. I just really want to attack that game in terms of the pass catchers in the passing games. I think the 2 possible outcomes are it totally shoots out and you want the Jalen Hurts, you want the Lamar Jackson, whoever ends up playing Superman, or both teams try to do their run heavy thing and neither team really pushes each other and neither running back is optimal is kind of like my vibe. Yeah, obviously it's Saquon Barkley. He can go absolutely nuclear. Same with Derrick Henry. But yeah, I think both are a little bit overpriced on this slate, just in terms of ADP, in terms of median outcome. You definitely can do it. You can include them as like your bring back for the other side of a game stack. That's where I'm getting most of my exposure. But it's not, they're not guys I really want to be targeting. And yeah, I agree. This is probably the weakest like 101 week we've had in a while. And part of the reason for that too is even if you're at the 106, I'd say like there's about 19 to 20 players that project incredibly, incredibly well before the projections kind of flatten out. In a typical week, we've had that be as low as like 8 or 9 players. So because it just goes through the first full 3 rounds, I'm kind of indifferent to where my draft slot is this week, more so than anywhere else. I guess just only other like running back names I wanted to say. I already said Chuba Hubbard. He seems decent. If you scroll down a little bit more, I just kind of struggle with this range because there's so many good running backs up at the top. I'm trying to get kind of 2 guys before Chase Brown goes off the board, with Brown being like the last one. I mean, theoretically, Ken Walker and Aaron Jones are projecting pretty well or close enough to those guys. I just kind of have like nitpicky concerns with both game environments. And there's just no clear scroll downs that I really love at the running back position this week. Brian Robinson is probably the guy that is most live for multiple touchdowns, which is certainly what you need on a slate with that's pulling these high of projections everywhere. So I guess if I have to go for a very low owned scroll down in the running back position, he's the name I'm clicking most often. But yeah, I'm trying to get my running backs earlier in these drafts.
Yeah, do you think the workload is going to be pretty strong for Robinson, assuming he can go? I know Tyler, shout out Tyler, did ask about that in chat. What are your thoughts on the potential B-Rob workload overall?
So Eckler's confirmed out, Eckler's confirmed out unless I misread that one earlier today. I mean, I think it could be pretty good, right? Like this is a 6-point spread. I know they don't want to kill Brian Robinson. Like they definitely will be mixing Jeremy McNichols into like the 40% role, but I have to assume all the high value stuff while the game is in question is going to Brian Robinson. Like they love handing off to this guy in the red zone. So that would be my lean, is that it would be pretty good. But it still feels thin though. You're right, because it's not as kind of locked in as like a Ken Walker or even an Aaron Jones. So yeah, I guess that's more what I'm saying with just the lack of good scroll downs, like great scroll downs at the running back position.
Yeah, when I was sort of going through some drafts earlier, Walker and Jones were certainly the 2 that stood out. I am curious, before we move on, what your sort of nitpicky game environment concerns are with those 2.
Okay. So I always have concerns in any game with Arizona. Hilo says it on Cashing Points every single week, where they don't want, we know Kyler Murray is capable of setting a game off. But that's not necessarily the intention. I think he could struggle quite a bit here, which, I mean, theoretically that's positive game script for Aaron Jones, and that's good. But I feel like the standard this week is just very high. Like I would not at all be surprised if the winning lineup has multiple running backs with 25 plus or 30 plus underdog fantasy points. With how some of these games are looking. So that makes a lot of sense, especially when you can get Chase Brown at RB8. I mean, it's waiting until RB12 for Kenneth Walker doesn't feel that special this week. Yeah. And I mean, with Walker, like Charbonnet got both of the goal line carries last week. It's been closer to an even split at the goal line between them over the past handful of weeks. You can say that Walker's been running bad. Like they've gotten into a couple of blowouts where he's been pulled, like just some weird stuff. The target volume has kind of been weirdly up and down for Walker. Like it's very good over the full season. And it was pretty decent last week, but there have been some weeks in there where it's like 1, 2, 3 targets for Walker. It's like, this wasn't what we were getting excited about circa like week 5. So yeah, I think neither of them are like the incredible bell cows that at certain points I've sold them as this season. Yeah, certainly think that's fair. Moving on to wide receiver here.
Ryan, what stood out to me immediately was Nico Collins, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown. We know Nico Collins and AJ Brown have incredible on paper matchups. And I know from hanging out in the Fantasy Points Discord that we expect Joey Porter Jr. to shadow T. Higgins. All three of these guys have to be incredible plays, right?
Yeah, no, they are all amazing. Like on the main slate, it's really about how do I get one or multiple of these guys into my lineups. And yeah, and you can, by the way, get multiple of them in Underdog. I have a couple teams already that are like Collins plus AJ Brown.
Wow.
So if you get these guys falling at the turn or whatever, definitely smash that. I guess I was just about to say who my favorite is, but I really go back and forth. Yeah, I love all three of them. I want to be building around and stacking all three of them. Chase has like the nuts schematic matchup. The on papers are great for the other two. So that's amazing. Puka Nacua projects just as well as that trio. The Saints have also been bleeding a ton of production through the air. You can single Nacua with Stafford. As I said earlier, I really like if you're sitting at the back of a draft to just do the Puka Nacua plus Cooper Kupp reach, because look, you're not giving up that much projection to go from like a Justin Jefferson to a Kupp, or from like an Alvin Kamara or a Bijan Robinson to a Kupp. But that's going to make you very unique in any of your Stafford doubles because it's not easy to just naturally fall into being able to draft both of those guys. So that's something I really, really like for, I guess, really for large fields and small fields alike, because you're ratcheting up that correlation for the small fields. I guess I'll say the projections kind of flatten out about after George Pickens. So once like Pickens is off the board, I am flailing a little bit at the receiver position in terms of I'm either trying to just find a bring back or making a pick that doesn't feel that great, honestly, is what happens most of the time. I guess guys after Pickens that I would highlight, don't scroll down to him because it's a long way, but Darnell Mooney has the nuts schematic matchup this week. The Chargers play a ton of too high. Mooney ranks top 5 in both yards per out run and fantasy points per out run against too high looks this season. Drake London projects basically the same, but we'll have like a little bit of ownership. But London is a strong enough play to kind of fill in like the last receiver spot as well. I already mentioned Brian Thomas. Really only care for him as like the bring back for the Stroud Collins stacks. But that definitely serves its purpose. Both the Jets guys project decently well. I don't love it. Like I've taken some Garrett Wilson. Like the volume has been so good over the full season, but the vibes are just so bad in New York that I'm not crazy about it.
And you really can't use them within stacks. Obviously we're not playing Aaron Rodgers. Maybe you could do like a Geno, DK, Garrett Wilson type team, but given what's on the board, that really doesn't feel great. Yeah,
exactly. So they're like, I might have clicked Garrett Wilson's name once in 20 drafts I did today, and that's about what it'll be. And then I guess the last guy I want to talk about is Calvin Ridley. So he's kind of a tricky one for me this week, both in BR and on the main slate. The volume's been great since Hopkins has been gone. He's gotten kind of unlucky the last couple weeks. He had a TD called back either last week or the week before. If you put that into his averages, he's just averaging wide receiver 1 numbers over the last 5 weeks, which is great. Commanders are a really tough kind of on paper matchup. They've been tough against all passing games over the past 5 or 6 weeks. They just really are selling out to stop the pass. But schematically, it's a best possible matchup for Ridley. They've been playing a lot more single high, like Dan Quinn has always wanted to do. And Ridley's numbers are significantly better against single high. I just worry about, like, obviously Tennessee's ability to stay in this game, like Levis against the blitz I worry about. But I think Ridley works as like a high upside, very like volatile last guy that you add that will be 0% owned. So that's how I'm viewing the receiver position.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good shout on Ridley. Before we move on, wanted to ask, do you have any thoughts on this Arizona-Minnesota game? I know you said you're always kind of worried about games with Arizona. I've had a bit of an Arizona vice this year. I've probably played a bit too much Kyler Murray throughout the season. This does feel like a game, at first glance, 45 total that maybe could go a bit overlooked. My problem with it is I have a hard time even convincing myself when there are just clearly so many better spots on the board right now.
Yeah, that's the issue. Is what do we have, 4 or 5 games above like a 47 point total this week? So yeah, it's hard to, like my version of that game that I'm fixated on is Falcons Chargers, but their total's at least a bit higher. But yeah, no, I hear you. I just don't love how these teams match up into each other. So gotcha. Minnesota dials up obviously a ton of blitzes, a ton of too high. Both of those things are really, really bad for Marvin Harrison. He is, I can't remember how I put it in advanced matchups, but insert terrible wide receiver here. He's about as efficient as that guy against too high this season. So yeah, I just don't see them pushing the ball down the field to push this game script. I think it's a totally good, we'll transition a tight end a little, I guess. I think it's a decent enough to good spot for Trey McBride. His target share, his yards per out run have come up a bit against the blitz. So that it could just be kind of another Kyler's panicking and throwing to a safety blanket the entire game type of deal is how I envision it. I just don't think the Vikings are going to be pushed enough at all for like Justin Jefferson to stack up to any of those other elite receivers that are being drafted around him. So yeah, if there's anyone in the first 3 rounds, I'm going to have 0% of it might be Justin Jefferson, just because I am worried about the game environment.
Well, that is certainly good advice as a guy who maybe has drafted Justin Jefferson once or twice so far. Glad to know that. This week at tight end seems particularly tough, if only because it's so flat. It feels like there's about 10 or 12 tight end options that all feel similarly. Obviously, the top tier, I think, is pretty clearly McBride, Taysom, Hawkinson. Do you have any clear leans there? I know Josh Oliver is going to be out again this week, which is huge for TJ Hawkinson's route share.
Yep. Yeah, I like the top 3. I have no issues with where any of them are going. I've just ended up with like the most Hawkinson because he seems to fall a decent bit pretty often. But Taysom Hill is, if you're doing any Matt Stafford stuff, Taysom Hill is my favorite way to bring that back. Just because he's a big play waiting to happen. Hill easily has the best upside of any tight end on this slate. So yeah, would love mixing him in game stacks out of them, whatever it is. You do have to kind of take him at like the tail end of when all the good players are off the board, like at tail end of the 3rd round is kind of where he's falling. So you're like really excited if he falls a couple spots past that. Like I've built some super teams where it's like 3 highly projected players plus Taysom and you feel incredible about it. So yeah, that's kind of like the state of the tight end position. But yeah, after that, 0 interest in K. Dotton. He averages like 6 fantasy points per game in games with Mike Evans this season. He was down to a 10% target share last week. Yeah, a little surprised he's the tight end 4. I've been like screaming for us to lower his projection all day.
I mean, I get it in the sense that he looked like prime Travis Kelce for about 3 weeks with no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin, but it is crazy that he just can't seem to earn targets unless it's a truly perfect setup with no wide receivers at all.
Yeah, but I mean, it's what we saw out of him for his entire career up until a month and a half.
It is. And that's why his 3-week stretch was so shocking to me. Like a 1.0 yards per route run for his entire career. Never a guy who's earned any targets at all. And then all of a sudden he's breaking every single slate. It was insane.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It is definitely it's confusing. But yeah. So no interest in Otten. Andrews is like a game stacks only player for me. It does help that Kolar is likely out, but likely still in. Just the median projection is not good enough. If you're picking Andrews, you're doing it because you're trying to pick touchdowns out of the 52.5 point total game. Like that, that's kind of all he is. Evan Ingram up to tight end 6. Okay, so I had Ingram was the tight end 7 up until a couple hours ago by ADP. He projects, I believe, as the highest tight end on the slate for us right now. So I was taking a lot of him. The Texans have been a major slot funnel. Ingram has led the Jaguars in target share in every single one of his healthy games this season. The splits without Christian Kirk are still insane. If you remove the Mac Jones games, but like we should probably remove the Mac Jones games. Let's be real. So yeah, Ingram's a really strong play here. But yeah, there's a lot of, I don't want to say strong tight ends, but viable scroll down tight ends. This is probably the best scroll down week at the tight end position we've had. Because there are just so many guys that you can tack on to a quarterback stack and have them be viable. So if you're drafting Jaden Daniels, you can just take Zach Ertz and that's how you get unique, and you can almost be done with it there. If you are ending up on a Kirk Cousins, I don't like Pitts' schematic matchup. He's been very bad against too high this year. So wouldn't necessarily go heavy on Pitts, but like that's an option you can do if you end up on Cousins. Will Dissly, I think, is very strong. So he has an incredible schematic matchup. The Falcons play a ton of zone. That's like Dissly's. That's like Dissly stuff. He's been incredible against zone, has almost all of his production the last 2 seasons against zone coverage. That on the flip side of it, that's like the worst schematic matchup for Ladd McConkey. So Dissly works kind of in 2 ways where the vast majority of Justin Herbert, I think, is just going to be Herbert plus Ladd. So if you're doing Herbert, Ladd, Dissly, you're getting unique. If you're just doing Herbert, Dissly, you're getting very unique. Like probably one of the better teams I can like make in my head is like Herbert, Dissly, and like 4 highly projected players. Like just draft best available for the first 4 rounds. Hope one of the top 20 falls to that 4th pick, and then just like clicking Herbert, Dissly. You can do the same with Herbert, Ladd, I guess, but it won't be nearly as unique. So yeah, just lots of. Just like do the tight end with your quarterback this week. Like that's the kind of week it is where we have all these high total games. We just want as much exposure to those passing game scoring as possible. So that's how I'm approaching tight end.
Yeah, this seems like one of the best weeks of the year for correlation because we have so many fantastic high total games. Just peeking over at our projections, it looks like Evan Ingram and Hunter Henry would be the best values. But again, it's so flat that I really am on exactly what Ryan said, where I'm largely taking tight ends that match up with my quarterback. All right, we can get into some drafts here. There really wasn't much that changed with the contest. Unfortunately, we did get some overlays, so they did end up making the main battle royale a bit smaller in terms of prize pool. They really cut the first place prize. They did also cut it down to a $5 entry. They also cut the Wildcat prize pool in half. Entry fees stayed the same, and it's now only a 50 entry max. Still probably my overall favorite tournament of the slate because those who are playing high volume will generally focus on the main battle royale tournament and won't have enough time to draft 50 or maybe any teams in the Wildcat. I forget if it was here last week or not, but the goal line stand is back. It's sort of hit or miss whether or not the goal line stand will be available in any given week, but it would be great if we could manage to draft a goal line stand team tonight. And then I think pretty much everything else is roughly the same as previous weeks. Fullback dive and the bomb looking good. Yep. And then we're on to early only, late contests, and then some of the community contests like the Deposit Kingdom and all that. Let's see if we can get into a goal line stand to kick things off. And if not, we can try a Wildcat. Wow, Ryan. How about that? Goal line stand filled with our entry. And we drew the 101, which in a normal week, I would be pretty excited about. This week, I'm okay with it. So Ryan, 12-team draft. What do we want to do here at the 101? I think I might be a bit more tempted by these wide receiver options, but I know you have a better grip on this slate than me. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I agree on yeah, I think receiver is where you want to go here. Just because, as we talked about, like my stance on like taking Mixon so much is just because like that's the only place you can get him, and he projects the best of the round one running backs. But yeah, I mean the receivers ceiling wise are just more. It's going to be harder to replicate that later in a 12-man draft, I think.
So the best combo that stands out to me, and you can tell me if you want to go a different direction here, but I think if we took Jamar Chase, Burrow's going around pick 23. I believe Pickens is going around pick 25. So we might be able to get both of those guys on the turn. I know, CJ Stroud is obviously going much later. I think if we draft AJ Brown, there's no chance we get Hurts. What do you think about going Chase and then a Burrow stack?
Yeah, no, I like it. Let's go Chase.
Right,
That's
great. Awesome.
Yeah, the way to go.
I like that build a lot. We will be giving up a little bit of projection at the running back position, but I think, there is still some depth there, and we'll be able to get a real premium stack out of this, especially if we landed Pickens, Burrow, Chase as a start. I think that would be very, very strong.
The one thing I do want to say before I'll probably think of it again later in the stream, but I just want to make sure I say this because it is, I think, one of the more important things to think about on this slate is the only bad thing about drafting Jamar Chase on this slate is it kind of outside of like I'm doing a double stack, it kind of locks you out of taking Chase Brown, which is not great, right? Like you think so? You would not. I think Burrow, Chase, Brown double is fine, but like just taking Chase and it not being a stack, I don't think I'd want to go Jamar Chase plus Chase Brown without Burrow. Maybe you disagree with that, but that's just something I've noticed as I'm drafting is I've been frustrated. Like, I don't feel like I can take as much advantage of the Chase Brown value now that I have Chase on this team that is ending up on like a different stack.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. I think normally I would agree with you. It gets a little dicier though when we're dealing with a running back who's going to get every single backfield touch. I mean, I do think there's a scenario where maybe Burrow only gets you 23. He doesn't quite put up a slate winning score. Chase still gets 100 yards, maybe a couple touchdowns, and then Chase Brown, just because he's getting every single backfield touch, ends up with a top 4, top 5 running back score. It's certainly not something that I want much exposure to. I think I'd be a little bit more okay with it than you, because again, like what we're seeing with Chase Brown, it's sort of like maybe back in the day, I wouldn't have loved this, but a DJ Moore on the Carolina Panthers with Christian McCaffrey and no quarterback, I think would be okay. Not, obviously not the best build imaginable. But yeah, that is an interesting question. That was something that I struggled with. I did a draft where I grabbed Chase Brown and Jamar Chase, ended up getting sniped on Joe Burrow. So I, ran to the back of the draft, and I think I grabbed Russell Wilson, and ended up with a 3 wide receiver build that also included George Pickens. I didn't love that team, but I did think I made the most of it. But yeah, that is a really interesting debate for this slate, whether or not you can play both Chases, Chase Brown and Jamar Chase, together. Yeah, that's tough. Again, guys, by the way, if anybody has any pressing week 13 questions, whether it's start sit, DFS, Battle Royale, feel free to ask them in the chat. Me and Ryan can always get to them in between picks. Ryan, we had a question a little bit earlier that said, Jawan Jennings or Calvin Ridley in 1-point PPR. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe Purdy is back this week. Trent Williams is out, correct? Or am I wrong?
That's a Sunday night game. I'll be honest. I've done 0 on the Sunday night game.
I can.
Sunday or I don't even know if it's Sunday or Monday, but yeah, it's not on the main slate. I haven't looked at it. My like biggest thing was the snow. I was told this morning that in Buffalo, it's like they're gonna have 2 feet of snow, but it shouldn't be snowing at kickoff. So that's probably not as huge a factor. I think I'd just go Jennings. Like both of these guys have had very good roles over the last few weeks. Now I'm thinking more about the Bills and what they do against outside wide receivers, jamming up too high. No, I'll go Ridley. That is a difficult one for me though. But yeah, I think I'll go with Ridley over Jawan Jennings this week.
Yeah, I think I would also go Ridley. I just brought up the Roto Grinders weather report. Kevin Roth gave the 49ers Bills game an orange tag, which isn't great.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, up to 2 feet of snow leading up to the game. Forecast for the actual game itself isn't nearly as ugly. Might get half an inch of snow during the game. Temps in the 20s, a little bit of wind. Yeah, I think I'd rather just go with the guy playing in slightly better weather, even though obviously there's a ton of volatility with any quarterback catching passes from Will Levis. I also just checked Brock Purdy is expected to play this week. And I know I got a notification earlier that Trent Williams was out. So that certainly makes for an interesting mix with the 49ers. And this is one of the best parts of the season because we get so many weather games, Ryan. I don't know if you've ever seen the Twitter discourse on weather games. Some people will have the take that every single game should be played in a dome because weather games ruin the product. I love football in part for the fact they'll play in anything as long as there's not lightning. They're playing no matter what. I love that element of the sport. Ryan, what is your take on that as we come up on the turn here? It looks like Burrow's still available. I don't think we can't get Pickens here. What do you want to do with our other pick before you give your snow take?
Yeah, this is tough because all the good running backs are gone now too.
Yeah.
Are there no tight ends?
We could get Hawk.
Gone. Yeah, Hawk might be my lean here.
Okay.
There's tight ends so deep though is the thing. Like
yeah. I feel like we should go running back or receiver with this one, and then come back to tight end later because there probably will be a tight end we're okay with later on in this contest.
Yeah, I mean projections wise, it's just going to be JSN by a mile. I think if we're
and we lost Burrow. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that was pretty rude.
Well, yeah, that was wild. All right. Do we want? I'm at a loss now,
Ryan. Well, we have to think about stacks we can set up or
McConkey Herbert.
Yeah, that was the first one that came to my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, we're reaching a little bit, but I think it's fine.
How big of a reach would it be for Herbert? We could wait another round. Okay, he's QB7. We probably don't.
The way to go probably would have been McLaurin Daniels, but it's too late for that, obviously.
Okay, yeah, you probably are right. My mind immediately went to Justin Herbert. All right, let's grab Justin Herbert. I mean, I do think this is a pretty good game environment, and the run backs will be available later. Like we should be able to get one of Mooney or Pitts later on. So I think we will still end up making the most out of this team, but it is a shame that we ended up getting sniped there on Joe Burrow. Ryan, now
I don't even mind doing like a 3 wide receiver build here just because I'm not in love with most of the running backs. So yeah, if you want to run it back with like a Mooney, then that it would be totally fine with me versus playing like Brian Robinson or a Ramondre Stevenson or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, chances are we'll only be able to get one of those decent running backs anyway. So I do think, probably near the end of drafts, those wide receivers are a little bit better. What's going on, Fantasy Dog Pound? Great to see you in the chat. Have to get you on the show again soon. Me and Ryan both had great turkey days, so appreciate you mentioning that. But yeah, Ryan, what is your take on these weather games, especially as a fantasy football analyst, as a guy that wagers real money on the games? What's your weather take?
So from first I'll give the take from a person that watches the NFL. Weather games are super fun. It's variety's the spice of life. I like when there's different elements, different things that are affecting the field of play like that. It makes it more interesting, right? Just as straight up as a consumer of the sport. From a fantasy football perspective, from a season long perspective, it feels terrible. If you're in a season long redraft league, it's past the trade deadline by the time we're getting all these weather games. You just feel like there's nothing you could have done about it. It's it's an act of God. Was no skill involved, no way to play around it. I guess Jamar Chase is just gonna score 0 points in the fantasy playoffs because the weather's so bad. That sucks. I get that. But from a DFS or betting perspective, I think it's also fun. It's another element that you're not thinking about or don't have to think about most of the time, or at least until this point in the season. So yeah, it just mixes things up. It keeps us on our toes a little bit. But yeah, I for people who play like most of their fantasy football in like a normal redraft format, like the traditional way, I guess I understand hating the weather games and wishing every game was in a dome.
Yeah, I guess that does make some sense. I mean, I feel like it's not just the uniqueness from a watching football perspective. It's the fact that, I mean, at least to my knowledge, I don't really know of any other sports that will play in severe weather like football teams will. I mean, I guess you'll have, the Bills will dip out of Buffalo if it gets too bad, to the point that they're going to have public safety issues if, 80,000 people are trying to get to the stadium. But outside of that, like you really don't see, in Major League Soccer, baseball, none of those other sports really seem to play heavy snow, heavy rain type games. I mean, there was that one Bears game in the 80s or 90s, the Fog Bowl. I don't know if you've ever seen highlights from the Fog Bowl. You can't see anything. You can't see from one sideline to the other sideline. It seems impossible they even played a game in those conditions. It's absolutely insane. I love the weather. I think the weather stuff is awesome, and I'm glad that we finally gotten some snow games in. It's that time of year, and I live in a warm weather area, so it reminds me that it's winter when I see snow on the ground in Pittsburgh and Buffalo and all that. All right, Ryan, we are coming up on our next pick here. I think we're probably looking at Mooney, right? I know we already talked about that. We still need a tight end, so we could also consider Pitts.
Or you can just go.
Yeah,
Disley.
Disley. Actually, yeah, I like Disley the most. Let's go Disley. So if we went Mooney, Disley, we could probably wait on both those guys because their ADPs are damn close to 36. Would any of these running back options stand out to you? I know Brian Robinson, we kind of talked about as being the best here. Are any of these other guys in play? James Conner is still dusted by Trey Benson, I assume. How did that usage kind of shake out last week?
So Connor's usage in the passing game was still very good, or even a little bit better. Benson, I don't know the percentage off my head. It was close. It was like a 33% for Benson before the bye. It was down to like 25% on the ground for him after the bye. So it didn't like kind of explode like we were scared of. So the Connor workload is still pretty decent. Should be fairly game script proof-ish. But yeah, like I've said, I'm just scared that this game is an ugly one, or that it's an ugly one for the Cardinals offense. I think he's fine though. And I guess we can't be super picky here. Like Tony Pollard and Najee Harris's workloads are both going to suck. I mean, just from a pure like workload perspective, I think Connor looks the best here of anybody. But
all right,
I'm not crazy about it.
Our projections, it looks like Connor's probably going to be our best pick here. No Aaron Jones on the board. I mean, they're all going around the same point. Do we want to just take our stack here and then we can let running back kind of come to us? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
All right.
Yeah,
the last thing I want to do is get sniped on Disley and Mooney. And this is a slightly smaller field contest. This is the $10 12-person, I believe it's called the goal line stand. And like I've harped on all season, in these smaller contests, and you really just don't still see many entrants doing this, you really want to jack up your correlation. We see this across DFS. All the best professional DFS players are generally rolling out pretty heavy stacks in smaller contests compared to larger contests. So I'm much more likely to single stack in like the main BR, the Wildcat, much more likely to double stack. I think especially in 12-person drafts or just smaller field contests in general, because there's just not as much that you need to get right. So that's why we are a bit more likely to reach for our stack in a spot like this. And the Wildcat, you kind of want your stack to come to you because the winning team is generally going to be one of the teams that got better value on their stacks. So that way they can grab some of the highest value overall players beyond the stack. I think this team is shaping up pretty well. Herbert, Jamar Chase, Ladd McConkey, Darnell Mooney, Will Disley. Originally, we wanted this to be a Joe Burrow build, but got sniped. Also, Kevin in the chat, I'm not sure if you heard us, but we did answer Jennings versus Ridley. I think we both were on the Ridley side given the weather. And I mean, I think missing Trent Williams just is worth a real dock to San Francisco's offensive efficiency. Probably hurts George Kittle the most overall in terms of fantasy viability because they will be keeping Kittle in to block quite a bit, which is sort of an interesting take for showdown, maybe wholesale fading a guy like George Kittle on Sunday Night Football would be pretty interesting. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this Bucs backfield after the usage we saw last week from Bucky Irving? How are things shaking out now going forward?
So I guess like the first question you have to answer is like, is Sean Tucker actually dead? Like, did they actually take him out behind the shed after he fumbled on the goal line? I think they did. He saw one touch the rest of the game. So if we're starting from this is for all intents and purposes a two-man backfield, maybe Tucker gets a couple of not important touches, like not inside the 10-yard line would be nice for Sean Tucker. So if you start from that point, this was the first game we've seen Bucky Irving both out-snap Rachaad White and run more routes than Rachaad White. So that's extremely bullish. We have seen all season that Irving is by far the superior player on the ground. I think he's second in missed tackles force per touch this year, maybe still behind James Conner. He's getting close, though. He's catching him. He just incredibly dynamic player on the ground. My only fear is that the industry is very, very convinced and very I feel like we've all just said, okay, well, it's over. Like it's Bucky Irving now, and he's going to get a 60% opportunity share. He's the guy in the passing game. Like, what if it is Rachaad White that runs more routes next week? Would that be insane? I don't think it's the most likely outcome, but I think there's a 35% chance that Rachaad White has more routes and targets than Bucky Irving this week. So I don't know. I don't think it's like as over as the industry might have you believe. Like Irving is not as locked in of a play this week. Like long term, Bucky looks like clearly the best in this backfield. It's probably going to be good next year in terms of like just drafting him in redraft next year where he'll likely be going. But yeah, I don't know that it's just the Bucky takeover and he's going to be running out with 70% opportunity shares. Like it's still been split at the goal line as well. We could definitely have some games where it's like Bucky Irving for 120 total yards and Rachaad White like scores a TD on the ground and through the air or something. Like, that's just what I'm envisioning. Maybe I'm too pessimistic and I should just sit back and smile and enjoy Bucky Irving and be thankful for Bucky Irving like everyone else this week. But yeah, that's where my head's at.
Okay.
I don't know who he's taking here though. I don't know that was a Rachaad White talent at all. But
to me, I think the main guys who stand out would be Najee and Gus Edwards. Do you have a strong take there? I know there's no J.K. Dobbins this week. I'd imagine the expectation is Gus and Kamani Vidal split. We do have a little bit of correlation with Jamar.
I don't want to take Gus when we're.
Oh yeah, that's true. We already are on. I guess. I mean, that kind of pencils us into Najee Harris, right?
I guess. But
I mean,
Warren's
we got a little correlation with Chase.
Yeah, I guess.
Jalen Warren's
we probably should have taken a running back.
I mean, that's the trouble with these 12-team drafts, man. I mean, you will end up, especially. I mean, we drew the 101 here, so our final pick is pick 72, and waiting that long for running back. I mean, the board is looking pretty grim. Was I mistaken in thinking Jalen Warren's workload was a little bit better last week? How's usage been in Pittsburgh?
I can't rattle off a percentage, but yes, Jalen Warren has become more involved over the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
All right. Well, that does not bode well for a Najee Harris pick, but I still think we made the most out of that team. If I remember correctly, it ended up being a Justin Herbert, Najee Harris, Jamar Chase, Ladd McConkey, Darnell Mooney, Will Dissly team, which I think for that contest is a pretty strong build outside of obviously 1 week link at the running back position. Again, guys, we'll probably go for another, maybe another draft or two here, another 10 or 15 minutes. So feel free to ask any pressing questions you guys have on week 13 in the chat. Ryan, what are you most excited about for week 13? What do you think is the most sort of exciting angle you've uncovered in your research this week?
Oh, it doesn't matter for Battle Royale, but it's easily Adonai Mitchell. Like, we're getting AD Mitchell in a full-time role, hopefully in the slot, if Alec Pierce plays on the outside. Even if I hope Pierce is in, because number one, I would prefer Mitchell in the slot. And number two, I feel like if Pierce is out, then the projections on Mitchell around the industry are going to start to come up. And I feel like we're going to lose our edge a little bit, just from an ownership perspective. Because he's 3,900 on the main slate. I think by far the best value, especially adjusted for upside. It's an ideal schematic matchup. He has been destroying man coverage all season. He actually has the most targets and the most production against man coverage of any Colts receiver this year, despite him running like a 35% route share.
Yeah, that seems pretty shocking.
Yeah, he's up at like a 60% target per route run against man. It's just ridiculous. Wow. He's top 2 in average separation score. Like, it's just the perfect spot for him. The Patriots have been vulnerable deep. They've been allowing a bunch of busted coverages as well. That's I guess part of why I like AR in Battle Royale. I don't think you can go to AD Mitchell in BR. I think that's too thin on a week like this. If this was last week on like last week's slate, I'd absolutely be doing that. AD Mitchell plus AR in Battle Royale.
Ryan, we are on the clock here at the 103. So what do you think? We could go Joe Mixon. Obviously, we've already taken a Chase team. I'm not super excited about Henry given the way he's projecting. So next best would probably be AJB and Puka. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, let's just do a Mixon team and we can stack up from there.
Are there any flaws in Mixon's profile? I would imagine outside of, probably the most obvious would be if Jacksonville were to get a lead here, we would see more Dare Ogunbowale in the backfield. Outside of that, it seems like a pretty great spot for Joe Mixon, right?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent spot for Joe Mixon. Yeah, I think Scott said this on Cashing Points, but the biggest case against Joe Mixon is just like if Nico Collins smashes instead, kind of.
Yeah.
The
Texans have been significantly more pass heavy with Nico in the lineup, right?
Yeah, exactly. They've been top 5 by PROE with Nico in the lineup. So yeah, it certainly could just be like a Nico Collins game. But yeah, I like Mixon a lot. He's involved in the passing game too. They're kind of like scheming up targets for him as well, which is nice. I don't know that that's going to stick around like in a shootout or if they're getting blown out or in a negative game script. But yeah, I mean, he's a really, really solid play.
Yeah. And then I'm curious, are you taking much Derrick Henry in the first round at all? I mean, generally in these Battle Royale drafts, his ADP has been fairly inflated. I know Philadelphia is a much tougher matchup through the air than they are on the ground, but obviously the Eagles could get out to a big lead here, in which case Henry's total dust. We have seen Justice Hill play really, really well this season. What are your thoughts on first round Derrick Henry?
Yeah, so in games that the Ravens don't win by at least 7 points, Henry's only averaging 16.4 fantasy points per game, which is like that's not like nothing, but that's not winning you a Battle Royale tournament. Certainly not this week with all the plays we have here. So yeah, Henry is kind of towards the bottom of my list of guys I'm prioritizing early on.
Gotcha.
I'd rather win 2 rounds than draft Chase Brown.
Yeah. We are on the clock here. I'm kind of thinking we could go like a backdoor Lamar Jackson stack. I really wanted your thoughts on Devontae Smith. I was surprised to see, we know this is a fantastic matchup for AJ Brown. Devontae Smith feels fairly underrated in this spot. He's never a guy that I'm itching to draft, very clear number 2 wide receiver in this offense. But in a game with a 52 total, I think something like a Lamar, Mark Andrews, Devontae Smith lineup will be pretty underappreciated here, right?
Yeah, it will definitely be unique. And that's, you're getting access to that same game environment. He has that same incredible, like, on paper matchup against the Ravens, where they've just allowed the most deep receiving yards, the most busted coverage yards, the most schedule adjusted to wide receivers, like all of the numbers we care about. Smith benefits from. He, I believe, was DNP and then limited with the hamstring. I haven't heard that he's not going to play. I think they're expecting him to. I don't know. I get a little sketched out guy first game back from a hamstring. When it's someone like Devontae Smith, as opposed to like, I'd just be doing it if it was Jamar Chase or AJ Brown probably. But yeah, I guess that's my reservation. And I like
that's definitely understandable. I mean, the nice thing with Lamar is we would have multiple late round outs. We could just go with an Andrews build. We could go with Say Flowers, who I think is going fairly late in these contests given the game environment. So far, though, we're on a Lamar Jackson, Joe Mixon, Chase Brown team. I thought Chase Brown pretty clearly the best available pick in that spot. Chase Brown is projecting so well. I mean, it really makes no sense. As a guy who's done no research basically outside of reading Ryan's article, spending some time in the Fantasy Points Discord coming into the slate, I just could not believe Chase Brown's ADP was in the 20s. I mean, it seems like it should be at least 15. He feels like a much better play than Kareem Hunt last week. And we were talking about Kareem Hunt, right around pick 14, 15, 16 being a pretty solid click. That Chase Brown ADP is absurd.
Yeah, it's weird too, because it's not as if he's being like under projected around the industry. Like, we aren't the only site that is very high on Chase Brown. So I don't know. I guess it's literally just people aren't like as on their game because it's Thanksgiving week. Everyone's not like grinding the battle royale lobbies as much as they usually would be. All the sharps aren't pushing up the ADPs of these guys.
I think that probably makes a lot of sense in
projections, but yeah.
Yeah, and that might be why underdogs size down some of these contests, is they just don't expect their players to have nearly as big of a bankroll for this slate as other slates. Ryan, for this pick, I was kind of thinking we go George Pickens here to get the correlation with Brown. Unless you had another wide receiver, we could maybe go Hawk.
No, I like Pickens here because we need to fill in projection at wide receiver as well.
How's the matchup for Pickens this week? Cincinnati runs a decent amount of single high, if I remember correctly, or am I off there?
They kind of go back and forth.
Okay.
So I was bugging Brett Whitefield in Discord this week with like a crackpot theory about well, it looks like the Bengals actually, when they go too high, it's usually against like the hypermobile quarterback, and he's like, no, dude, like it just stop. They're not. This is correct. I was like trying to talk myself into I'm gonna write up George Pickens for advanced matchups. But I mean, just in terms of on paper, they're a top 7, top 8 matchup for opposing outside wide receivers. Obviously, Pickens is up above a huge first read target share. Him and Malik Neighbors are the only receivers with more than 4 games above a 40% first read target share this season, which is insane. Pickens has 5 games. Neighbors has like 7 now after last night. But yeah.
Wow. That is insane. So I'm thinking, Hawkinson is still on the board here. I kind of like the Hawkinson pick, and then maybe we could follow that up with a Zay Flowers, unless you have other thoughts.
Yeah, no, I like it. Let's go Hawk. Someone will probably snipe us on Zay, and then we're locked out of Andrews, and we'll cry. But it's fine. We can get upset.
That's the way it goes sometimes. But so far, we are locked into a Lamar Jackson, Joe Mixon, Chase Brown, George Pickens, TJ Hawkinson team. Got some nice correlation. You can see that kind of highlighted by the bestballoverlay.com tool. So you can see those Baltimore names popping a little brighter because it reflects some correlation with our quarterback here. Really like this build so far, and I really appreciate Ryan for answering all of my questions, as I am very uninformed on this slate. It is a great slate, though. I was telling Ryan earlier, I'm a little disappointed I didn't get to do content for this slate. I always appreciate a little time off during the busy season, but man, this is shaping up to be a really fun one, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of it's just so fun to sit here and like talk about teams and draft teams on it.
Yeah.
I'm worried I'm going to be really tilted when the slate actually happens, just because my level of excitement is so much higher than for a normal slate. Like, I don't know what do they say? Like satisfaction is like the distance between expectation and reality or something. I don't know. I butchered whatever that saying is, but
that sounds
my expectations
right.
are so much higher. So when the reality kicks in for how the slate actually ends up going, I might be like extra disappointed. But right now it's Friday night. I'm just enjoying all the fun plays on the slate before
that's
crash and burn.
That's what it's all about. As soon as it's 1:19 p.m. on Sunday, you'll realize all of your lineups are total dust. But it's about the anticipation leading up to the event. It's not about the event itself. I've always found that on the slates where I just feel amazing. Those tend to be the slates that maybe I play a little too much volume and just get killed, and the slates I'm more, I'm okay about this. That's when I win the big money for whatever reason. I'm sure that really is more of an anecdotal take than anything backed in actual statistics. It'd be funny if I did like a 1 through 10 rating on each slate throughout the year, like how confident I feel going in, compared that to the actual results. I think that'd be pretty interesting. Because I know I have heard some high-end DFS players say like, oh, if you feel great about a slate, that's a good slate to play a little bit more volume. And the slates you feel bad, maybe dial it back a little bit. And that like intuitively makes sense, right? It's just not really my exact experience. But anyway, ended up with a Lamar Jackson, Joe Mixon, Chase Brown, George Pickens, Zay Flowers, TJ Hawkinson team. I think we got time for one more draft here. We can hop into a Wildcat, maybe one of these $25 teams. But yeah, Ryan, I don't know if that reflects your experience at all in terms of playing some of these slates here.
Yeah, I think when I'm confident or when I feel good about a slate, that's what usually now that this has happened to me a few times, I'm like, I'm missing something. Like I haven't sufficiently thought through everything. And that's why I feel so confident that nothing could go wrong. So I think that is, that's where I'd stand. Like the more I'm like worried about different angles that I'm not playing, probably the better job I've done on the slate, which I mean should in theory correlate a little to results. But I don't know that I feel so confident on this slate. It's more that there are just so many fun different things to do on the slate. Like I have honestly, this Sunday morning when I'm like building and locking in lineups for the main slate is going to probably be the most stressful Sunday morning of the season because there's just so much to get to. And I know I'm going to I might play 9 different quarterbacks on DraftKings on the main slate. And I'm not like a high volume MME guy. Like I'm playing like single entry and 3 max most of the time. And I might have a different quarterback in every single lineup.
Yeah, this is a great week for the DraftKings has a $10 10 entry max contest. It's not huge. It's only about, if I remember right, maybe 5,300 entries with 4K to first. On slates like this, that is a contest that I love playing because 3 max, 5 max, single entry, it's just not going to do the variety on this slate justice. I want exposure to, like Ryan said, I think 8 or 10 different quarterbacks. I am in the $25 fullback dive here. We're waiting for one more. I'll give it another couple minutes before I switch to a Wildcat, and then we can get out of here, Ryan. But we did get, I think, a pretty interesting question in the chat from Kyle Woods asking PPR pick 3 to roster rest of season, Devon Vele, NWI, Cedric Tillman, Alec Pierce. I think I can say without a doubt, Cedric Tillman is going to be one of those guys. The other 3, it's more of an interesting debate, Ryan. What are your thoughts here?
I think, I agree. Tillman, I'd want to roster clearly. I think Devon Vele would also be pretty clearly my second pick there for a guy to keep on the roster. I don't know, like the upside's not incredible, but Bo Nix is playing a lot better. Vele has actually consistently been running above a 60% route share, which is more than literally any other Broncos receiver outside of Cortland Sutton can say this season. And he's been getting the targets. So he's a rookie. I think he turns like 27 or something in a week or 2, which is funny.
He's a 27-year-old rookie. I did not know that, Ryan.
26 or 27. Yeah.
Did he go to BYU? What happened there?
Or is
he one of those COVID guys that played forever?
Let's see.
I'm very curious.
He was born December 12th, 1997. He played at Utah.
That is way too old to be a rookie. Okay, played at Utah. Did he go on a Mormon mission? That's the question. If not, that he played in college for like 8 years, right? Or maybe went to prep school and then did 6 years in college.
I don't know. Hang on. I'm just pulling up.
Yes,
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm pulling up his sports reference page right now, and I can tell you.
I am very curious about this. I mean, I figured Vele was like 23 or 24, like normal rookie age.
Yeah, he played. I mean, he played at Utah for 5 years. So 2019.
So did he graduate?
Then he would have been 20. He would have been a 22-year-old freshman.
He had to do a mission.
How does that happen? Yeah,
he had to do a mortal mission. Kyle Wood said in the chat that he did go on a mission. Okay, yeah, so that makes perfect sense then. Went on a mission and then went to Utah. The Taysom Hill arc ended up being a 27-year-old rookie, but yeah, that is absolutely insane. Guys, we are in the $25. Oh yeah, producer Tom said that he went on a mission in Samoa. Wow, producer Tom with the knowledge here. All right. Someone left their $25 draft, so we will hop into a Wildcat to finish.
Oh, we should actually answer the question. Sorry. So yeah, I keep.
Yeah, that's true. We got distracted by Devon Bailey being 27 years old. Yeah. All right. So I think Bailey, Tillman.
I guess Pierce over Nick Westbrook-Akina is who I would take. I know Westbrook has scored long touchdowns in like 2 out of the last 3 weeks, but we've been there with Alec Pierce too. I just think the profile, the upside is a little better. It's very like neither guy is probably gonna matter. And
I figured, and both of those players would fall into the category that'll just drive you insane in redraft. For like the 1 week that you need them is the week they score 4 points when they're actually in your lineup, and then on your bench they're scoring 22 points every time. I guess my only question would be if Joe Flacco was starting for Indianapolis, given that most of Pierce's production has come with AR, would you then lean a little bit more towards NWI? I'm with you. I do think Pierce is the better option rest of the season.
When am I ever putting NWI into a lineup? Like
I don't know.
I don't know.
You're playing in a 16-team league.
He was cheap in DFS like both weeks that he scored a long touchdown, and I did not. I was like, oh, I was never winning this week. That's fine. Like I'm not upset that I was never playing NWI. So yeah, I don't know. I think like Pierce, maybe you talk yourself into like a Joe Flacco game environment or something with Pierce at least.
Maybe,
but not with Will Levis, man. Like so still Pierce for me.
Yeah, I am with you. Ryan, Gabriel Horwitz, we will get to your question in a second here, but I want to make sure that we don't mess up our 1-2 turn pick here. Ryan, pick 6 and 7. What are we thinking? I kind of like the idea of like an AJ Brown, Lamar Jackson combo. I know we took Lamar in that last draft. Any other angles? We could do the Puka Cooper Cup reach that you were mentioning earlier. Oh, and Puka is off the board. So what are your thoughts here?
I think we're definitely going AJ Brown.
Gotcha.
And then the question is like, do you want to, you can do Lamar, or do you want to reach for Hurts? You can get Hurts on the next turn. I've done it. It's not super consistent. If we don't take Hurts, I want to make a pick that lets us take advantage of if Hurts falls generally. So that would be like a Kamara or a Cup or a Bijan, or what if you want Justin Jefferson, fine, but let's go Kamara. He is the best available by ADP, and I think he's probably best available by our raw projections here, and then we might be able to grab like a Hurts Chase Brown type combo at the turn. I think that would be pretty nice, and then if not, we can save it with some sort of backdoor stack. But I did think this was a pretty interesting question here in the chat. What do you think of Juwan Jennings rest of season? And then also asking for our thoughts on Calvin Ridley, Brian Thomas. Ryan, I would imagine I kind of want to talk about Brian Thomas first. I think he might be the most interesting. This is probably the best time all year to buy low on Brian Thomas, right? Yeah, the best time was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, which I should say is when Scott Barrett and I were screaming from the rooftops in the everything report that you should be buying low on Brian Thomas. But yeah, I guess you have until kickoff, maybe next week, or excuse me, on Sunday, to really do it. Yeah, I would prefer, of this trio, I prefer Thomas rest of season. We've just what rookies can do in the second half of the year, especially when they've already been one of like the 10 most productive rookies of the last decade or so in the first half of the rookie season is, yeah, I want that upside first and foremost. I mean, the Trevor Lawrence injury is like his non-throwing shoulder. I can't imagine it affects him that much. Certainly no more than Brock Purdy's injury would be affecting him rest of the year. So yeah, I think
wasn't Purdy's injury to his throwing shoulder, or am I mistaken in that?
Yes, yeah, his throwing shoulder. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I do remember there was that year. Yeah, there was. So my only concern would be there was that season Baker Mayfield had a serious injury to his non-throwing shoulder. I believe that was that 21 or 22 that he played through, and it ended up costing him a ton of money with the Browns.
His last season with the Browns, yes.
Yeah. So that would be my concern, because it clearly did impact his play. He was in a ton of pain, and I mean, you would never expect a guy like Baker to sit through something like that. Former walk-on, I think, is going to play through just about anything. They're probably always, the voice in their head is going like, no, you really got to do this. So that would be my concern with Lawrence. I do think this is a really interesting debate. We can keep going with it shortly here. We are on the clock, Ryan. Chase Brown made it back to us. We are not going to get Jalen Hurts, though, it looks like here. Yeah. What are your thoughts here? We could go.
So you could just click like Higgins Burrow if you wanted here. I wouldn't hate that at all.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I'm like the king of wide receiver cornerbacks don't matter, but let's do it. Let's go with the Higgins Burrow stack. Yeah, Joey Porter Jr. does scare me a bit. Him and Surtain are kind of the only two that do. But I mean, Higgins has been balling, and this game, we could get some real offensive fireworks here. So I definitely like that, and this will probably be pretty close to the only Higgins Burrow team I end up taking. So even just for diversification purposes, I think that's the right move. Even though my mind is screaming at me to be a little bit more fearful of Joey Porter Jr. Even though I've written thousands of words as to why he does not matter for fantasy football at all. Yeah, I think we probably spent enough time on Brian Thomas. I think his rest of season outlook is pretty strong. Calvin Ridley, I think his rest of season outlook is pretty simply just he's going to be extremely volatile. With Will Levis under center, do you have anything to add on Ridley?
Yeah, Ridley's schedule is very good after this week, I believe, just in terms of schedule adjusted allowed to wide receivers. So, I mean, that helps, obviously. But yeah, volatile, high upside week to week. Not a high floor, of course. But yeah, I think Jennings is probably the most interesting because
for sure.
My assumption, or I guess I'll say my vibe is that,
okay.
So Trent Williams played through that injury for at least 1 week, probably longer. And he was out last week, likely out this week. And my assumption is if the 49ers don't beat the Bills, he's just going to get shut down for the season because then they're basically out of the playoffs, I believe, with what the NFC West looks like. I could be totally mistaken, but that's what I'd worry about is just that the offense in general is just completely diminished without Williams, and then maybe Purdy gets shut down in that timeline too. But yeah, I don't know. It's pretty I'm pretty upset about the Juwan Jennings run out because I feel like I was so right to be like so bullish on him, and we all saw it, and then we're not going to get rewarded for it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Ryan, we are on the clock, and then I can give a couple thoughts on Juwan Jennings, but I do mostly line up with you. We need a running back and a tight end here, unless you want to go through wide receivers. I'm kind of thinking maybe like an Ingram, Kenneth Walker type build. I know Evan Ingram's projecting really well for us. What do you think? I'll take Ingram first, and then we can talk running back.
Yeah, definitely Ingram.
Okay.
I think I prefer Chuba to Ken Walker.
Okay, I would just be so worried about a blowout, but Bryce Young has been playing better.
He has been. I wrote like so many words about how I don't think Bryce Young is real and how it's a really bad schematic matchup for him now, though. Yeah, just take Chuba. He projects like 2 points higher, if that matters to you.
Chuba does? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take Chuba then. All right, so we ended up for our final team of the day: a Joe Burrow, Kamara, Chuba Hubbard, AJ Brown, T Higgins, Evan Ingram team. I think that's pretty solid. Again, not in love with T Higgins as a play this week against Joey Porter Jr., but if this game environment ends up going off, I do think we will see a great score, potentially from both Chase and Higgins. So certainly a stack that I want exposure to in DFS. Noto M,
I should also say, like, industry opinion is split on who Porter's going to shadow. We feel good that he's going to be on Higgins because he plays that X receiver role. But I know, like Mike Clay, I think has it as a shadow on Chase. So that
really
it could be, yeah. That I was.
I mean, they might just make him play a side, right? Like, is that possible? Is that something he's done this season?
I believe so. I can't remember what game it would have been, but there was definitely at least one game where there were two good receivers and he just played aside.
Yeah, that would be sort of my thought.
But yeah,
if they view them as sort of equal threats, it doesn't really make sense to shadow either player in particular. You'd probably want to get Porter on both of them at various points in the game. That is a really interesting question. Yeah, Chase does run a lot more routes from the slot, so that probably does protect him from the shadow in some regard. I am a little surprised to hear Clay thinks Porter would shadow Chase, given how Stephen O'Rourke is the guy who does our wide receiver cornerback matchups. He seemed pretty confident that Higgins would get the shadow there. So certainly trust Stephen with all that kind of analysis. Ryan, we got one final question here. Are Brian Robinson and McLaurin cooked with this declining Commanders offense? I do think part of the decline has been the Jaden Daniels injury. I still think the Commanders are sort of a decent long shot bet to win the Super Bowl. You just look at them through the first 8 weeks of the season. This was an incredible offense, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got it back. The Cliff Kingsbury second half of the season always being worse by, basically every metric available. Splits are a bit concerning. Ryan, I'm really curious what your take is on the Commanders offense.
So I should say that the depth of my research of this has been I've read a lot of tweets about the Cliff Kingsbury stuff.
This is the best thing to give a take on. Something you've only read tweets about. I mean, this is perfect.
Yeah. So I've read a lot of tweets about this. I haven't independently verified literally anything on it. But it's an interesting conversation. I guess I'll give my take. So my understanding is that the Cliff Kingsbury like first half, second half splits aren't necessarily that real. Kyler has missed time at the end of multiple seasons when he was with Kingsbury, so that is obviously going to affect that. Offenses in general tend to go down a bit later in the season, from what I understand, just because of stuff like weather. I haven't looked into how many weather games they had played in or anything like that. Like I said, have only read the tweets, haven't done the actual work to back my opinions up. But yeah, I would think that the Jaden Daniels injury was the biggest thing. And just from watching him and how he looked prior to last week, especially, that was my kind of take, was that, yeah, I know Brett Whitefield and all of our film guys were saying, yeah, he can't push the ball downfield. Like anything beyond 5 yards is just dying on him. So yeah, I kind of expect the Commanders offense to bounce back. In like a normal week where there aren't 5 other games that I think are way better, I might be taking a stand on that, like in DFS or in BR. But yeah, there's just so many other shiny things to chase this week. Yeah. But yeah, I'm not down on the Commanders offense at all, really.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of the Tua can't play in cold weather narrative, which I know, obviously the Dolphins lost yesterday, so I'm sure some people are still really going to cling to that. Tua did score the most DraftKings fantasy points of any quarterback on the slate yesterday. He was one of my biggest fans, was playing a ton of Tua. I thought his ownership was probably artificially reduced by the Tua can't play in cold weather narrative, and especially, something like 30-degree weather just doesn't end up mattering that much. So always, whenever you see a narrative like that, if you find yourself kind of buying into it, always good to maybe dive a bit deeper into the data and see what's actually going on there. Because part of the issue with Tua is, the Dolphins were beat up later in the season, and we just didn't have a significant sample size. I mean, I believe it was like 6 or 7 games over the course of his career with weather under, below freezing, which is just, that's like nothing, right? So, yeah, Ryan, before we get out of here, thank you so much, by the way, for answering all my questions. I feel like I know a lot more about this slate than when we started the show. Ryan, where can people find your great work? Where can they go to ask you questions?
Yeah, so you can find all of my written work on FantasyPoints.com. Advanced Matchups Week 13 came out earlier this morning, Friday morning. Definitely check that out. That's just where I fully go through the data suite and pull out any schematic edge, any possible angle I can find, and list it out for you, write up some guys I have conviction in. And yeah, I put so much time into that article. I've loved writing it this season. You can read it for the low Black Friday price of $10 for a Fantasy Points premium subscription for the rest of the season. We've just totally slashed our prices this week. I think the sale is going through tomorrow, through Saturday. So might not.
I don't know about you, Ryan. Way too low. I think these prices are absurd. I saw the prices and I was like, what is going on? This is the company that pays me, and you can get premium for $10. That doesn't make any sense. But I know the thinking from Mr. CEO Scott Barrett was that you're going to like it so much that you will end up subscribing again. And I do genuinely believe that. I think if you end up trying out any of the stuff, especially the data suite, which I believe was free this week, if I'm not mistaken, Ryan, and I know you can get all in for $40, which also includes the data suite. I mean, the data suite, if you do any of your own research at all, is going to save you a ton of time compared to using any other site out there. So yeah, I could not believe how low they slashed the prices. But yeah, it really gets you very cheap access to Ryan's great column, Advanced Matchups.
Yeah, no, it's just just kind of opportunity of a lifetime to get access to all of this content, and not just mine, not just Jake's, everyone's on the sites. It's just a ridiculous amount of content you get access to for those rock bottom prices for the rest of the season. So yeah, definitely go check that out. FantasyPoints.com/subscriptions or whatever it is. I should know that off the top of my head.
I mean, that's probably right. Close enough. If you type that into Google, you will eventually find your way there. Obviously, you can find all my stuff over at Fantasy Points as well. On a normal week, I'd be helping Scott Barrett out with his slate breakdown. This week, I did not contribute any blurbs, but I might be talking him off Devin Duvernay later tonight. I don't know, Ryan. I will read the blurb, and I will decide if I think Devin Duvernay is a good play or not. But definitely go check out Ryan's content, all the great stuff we got going on over at Fantasy Points. Again, massive sale right now. Price is so ridiculously low, it made me do a double take and say, oh my God, this is my employer. I cannot believe they slashed things so dramatically. But I do think certainly worth checking out. And again, thank you guys for all the great questions, all of the chat engagement, and of course, for tuning in to the Week 13 edition of the Underdog Drafter Party. We really appreciate it, and we will see all you guys at the top of the leaderboards.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.